I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, there we go.
You got me now? Okay, awesome. I was going to say, hey, thanks for the putting up with the friction back and forth there, getting started.
Oh, no, not a problem. Not
Awesome.
a problem.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks for joining. This is I love doing the race podcast. It's always super fun to kind of hear some of the internal voice conversations maybe you had, how you reconciled training and racing. In your case, some highlights stand out for sure, like who needs to go outside. It's unclear to me if you actually left the house at all in the 6 months leading up to this race. So we need to uncover that part.
Yeah.
and then the race itself. So, all right, Chattanooga 70.3. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is a little unique for you, right? Let's set the stage because, like you said, you signed up earlier than normal.
Yeah.
What's that? How does that work for you? What's the story behind that?
So Chattanooga is it's like 90 minutes from my house, and I felt like every year for like the last probably 4 years, like it gets to be it'll get to be like April, and Chattanooga is like a mid to late May race.
Yeah.
And I always, every year I felt like, oh man, like April would roll around, like I'm in such great shape from kind of all the winter work. And it's really easy to go from that 10-hour a week kind of position into like a 70.3. And every year it's sold out. It's a very popular race. It attracts a lot of athletes, a lot of really strong, athletes as well.
Yeah.
And so this is one that was like with the kids, of 3 kids that they're 2, 4, and 5 now. That 90-minute kind of travel up there. It's close enough to where if something happened, I could go solo, or the family could come, and it wouldn't be like this big, extravagant thing. So decided to sign up a little earlier this year before it sold out, just because I was just kind of thinking, for 4 years in a row, I keep wanting to do something. And when, April rolls around and the stuff's sold out. So, and historically I've done the Gulf Coast 70.3, which is the weekend before that. But my 4-year-old had her first little, like dance recital thing. So that was nixed. So I was like, what's the next one? Okay, Chattanooga. So that's how I chose Chattanooga.
I can see those conversations too, because you're like, honey, I want to put this race on the calendar. Okay. Like, we've been doing it for years. And she's like, there's this thing. And you're like, what's on my calendar? There's something else on my calendar aside from my things. Like,
yeah, exactly. So that's the first year that's happened, which is, it worked out great because, it's Chattanooga. It's a beautiful course. It's not really my strong suit, I would say, but I'm super happy with kind of how it turned out.
Totally. Yeah. I think from the macro level, from the outside looking in, I thought you put together a fantastic race. Like, it's hard when externally the validation, like, hey, where did I end up? Like, what does it look like? When you kind of throw the dice out on the point, and comparatively, it's maybe not what you thought it would be, but I think you made some big steps here for you going forward. So, we got you in the races. Now let's talk a little bit about your training decisions, right? So you've got a great setup. Like, when you do our office hours and you drop in on Monday nights, it depends. Like, you could be on the bike inside, you could be in the sauna inside, you could be somewhere else. I'm not quite sure where. I feel like I've seen almost every room inside your house at this point. So
it's all in the garage.
It's all just one room. Amazing.
Amazing. So the training, so the last race I did was actually last May at Gulf Coast, and I didn't do any late season races in 2023. It was fine. Like, I really enjoy the process of training. I don't really need a race on the calendar to stay engaged for the most part. So, the consistency aspect is really just something I kind of stuck with. And really is probably helpful because I spent most of the back half of last year, I went, so in fall of 2022 is when I had my bike accident and broke my hip, and it really put a dent, like obviously put a huge kind of hamper in the run volume for 6, 8, 9 months. I went from averaging maybe 100 miles a month, plus or give or take, depending upon like race builds and things, to really, and over the course of, if you look at kind of the lowest point in a 12-month rolling, I was maybe under 500 miles. And, the bike, I was able to pick up a lot quicker, just from a volume perspective. So that kept it, the bike stayed pretty flat, across that whole thing. And the run fitness, the lack of volume really showed up last May. And so not having a race on the calendar allowed me to really, I still was kind of just chasing a volume number, and it really didn't matter what pace I was running. Right. So I would characterize it as somewhere between like a TRP, zone 2, very rarely did I like edge into like zone 3, zone 4 hard running for the better part of 6 or 8 months, really until I got into the winter. I was really just looking for 8 miles, 9 miles here, a couple of times a week, some short stuff off the bike. But it really never mattered, I'm pretty unstructured, just kind of trying to hit a volume target. So, then going into, so signing up, and I really didn't swim the back half of last year either, with nothing on the calendar. So when I signed up for Ironman Chattanooga early, it was like an immediate got to get in the pool. So I spent a couple of months, I started swimming, coming back from a 6-month sabbatical from swimming. You kind of just intellectually know, like, it's going to be 4 weeks.
Oh yeah.
Call it a dozen swims before you're feeling pretty decent. And that what kind of turned out to be the case. So, I did mostly like 10 by 200. I did do some longer like single set swims. I knew like Chattanooga course is a long course. And when I raced the full back in 2019 on that course, the water was hot. So it was not wetsuit legal, and there was no flow. Like it was terrible. So, you just never know what to expect. So I just actually, any of those swims that were like, go swim at 2000 straight, I just made it 2400. Just knowing it would be long, I'd rather have the extra 10 minutes of swim time, to prepare. And then in case it turns out on the day that there's no, flow in the river or something. Right. So I really only had like January forward from a swim volume perspective, 3 or 4 months. And really, like, that's sufficient for a 70.3 in my mind. Like I kind of got to a place where I was fit enough to enjoy it. It wasn't going to affect the rest of my day. And I also kind of knew that I wasn't going to allocate the time to swim 5 times a week to get faster. Right. So, and it actually, for Chattanooga, it turned like on the day, it turned out really good because it was wetsuit legal. It was a really fast flow. I think I ended up swimming like a 1:17 per 100 meter pace.
Crazy.
Swimming 2 extra times a week in training and that build wouldn't have made a dent. I would have seen like a 1 second, it just wouldn't have mattered. So that was kind of what swimming looked like. I was hitting maybe 2 swims 1 week, 3 swims the next. And that was kind of my goal, is averaging 5 swims across 2 weeks. And really that was ideal, because the swims are probably the easiest sessions. Like from a active recovery perspective, like I can't swim hard enough to really do any damage to myself. So
I like that.
So those swims are actually all, I just kind of characterized them as all the active recovery I had. As far as the bike sessions go in training, I really kind of just followed, had the intervals midweek. I did a lot of sweet spot kind of as a secondary weekday ride if I had time. So maybe like FTP style intervals, or like some kind of a primed FTP where, the first set's maybe 105, 110% for 5 or 6 minutes. And then you jump into, 2 or 3 sets closer to your true FTP. So I would do that maybe on a Wednesday, and then on a Friday, if I felt good, I'd follow it up with like a 4x12 sweet spot, 90%, or like a 2x24. So I was getting kind of the high end stuff there. Saturday I did, I probably didn't ride longer than 3 hours. So that, that was fine. And I did that indoors. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck from an efficiency perspective. There's no coasting time, nothing like that. And then really where I probably made the biggest change from any prior race is I really actually historically, so from a cycling perspective, I've actually been very, I'm a fairly strong cyclist, both against the field, age group in the past I have been. So, and one of the things that I've always done in training on the bike is like, I'll push an extra minute or I'll push an extra 2%, or something, there's some aspect of a session where I'm like kind of pushing the envelope a little bit if I'm feeling good. And I've never taken that approach to the run, or the swim for that matter. I've always been a little bit anxious for whatever reason about like run injuries, like putting too much intensity into the run and then kind of forcing myself into some kind of an overuse injury. So I always erred on a more conservative side with the run by, if it was zone 4, maybe it was like zone 3 plus, from a pace perspective, things like that. And that I've done that for like years. Get the volume, but maybe not the intensity. And this time around, I just started with, I was like, I'm going to go all in on the intensity on the run and just started plugging away, running the paces I needed to be running. And admittedly, for the first 3 or 4 weeks, they felt a little hot. But it's amazing, like 10 weeks in, the stuff that I felt hot initially, I was cruising through. I'm still running. I'm still feeling like I'm cruising through at paces I used to not run at all. So that played probably one of the biggest roles, on the day, as far as like from a performance perspective. I will say so I did a lot of that on a treadmill. So being a May race in Tennessee, I live in Georgia. So there was a couple of warm days, 82 degrees, if you want to call that warm. Running outside, the only benefit I would have gotten is hitting some kind of an elevation, right? Running up a hill somewhere. But it's not like the difference between running inside on a treadmill versus running outside is like, you're training for some kind of a September race where you need that heat adaptation. You need to feel what it feels like to run a pace when it's 90 degrees outside. For this race specifically, Chattanooga can be hot, but this year it was pretty moderate. The variance between running inside on a treadmill where I can control the pace, and it also fits into my lifestyle. I can do it. I can do it at work on my lunch break. Things like that. It's more important to check the box and get it done versus what would be the ideal situation. Yeah, of course, it would be to go outside and get more outside run time. But you waiting longer in the day, waiting until I got home with the kids and all that, you're asking for more opportunities to derail it, right? So it'd be more likely that 1 hour run turns into a 30-minute run in the afternoon, if at all. So I'd figured like get the most, from the bang for your buck, fit it in where it fits in, even if it is on a treadmill in 72 degrees versus waiting to run in 80-degree weather, trying to get that exposure. But then what if it doesn't happen because life, So I really have enjoyed that aspect of it, been able to stay fairly healthy, injury-free through running intensity. I layered in, this is probably the most consistent I've been with stretching, call it 5, 6, 7 minutes after every run, like stretching the groin, stretching, glutes, hamstrings, all of that, which I think has kind of helped actually develop the turnover, like the fast pace. It's the only thing I can really explain is just the really consistent, like 5 minutes of stretching after every run session. It kind of keeps you loose. It keeps it from getting too tight. In the past, and I'm sure other athletes that are listening to this have had the same issue. You know, you do that run and the next day you're walking down the stairs and it's like, you're just like hobbling, you know, down the stairs, like, oh my God, that 9 mile run crushed me. And I really didn't have any of that, you know, through the build. So that was really nice. I will say that, a couple of the things that I could change in the future is I really didn't start focusing on race day nutrition until like the last 4 weeks. Okay. I mean, I waited really late to try to game plan like how I was going to get calories in. It definitely, so there was a few Saturday rides, those 2.5, 3 hour sessions that really could have been better from a performance perspective, but because I was just underhydrating during them. It took me a long time to turn the switch on to, you know, to think like I need to fuel this way for, you know, in preparation for race day. So, you know, starting that process of practicing different nutrition earlier in the build would have been ideal. And honestly, the thing that kind of kicked me into high gear with that was finding out that the mortal hydration thing scared it scared the bejesus out of me. I was like, what the hell is this product? Like, and then I'm like on the feed, you know, like ordering like Morton gels and mortal hydration. I'm like, oh gosh, is this stuff going to work with me? And then once I got it in and I got a few sessions under my belt, I'm like, okay, you know, I have a pretty resilient stomach. And then it was just a matter of like, how am I going to get the calories in per hour, you know, mile, at least stretched out across the hour as best as possible. And from there, the other thing I did around the prep was I signed up for the 2 free weeks of the Full Gas at Training app, you know, so it's still indoors, but I did get to see the course probably 4 or 5 times, you know, just to get a sense for like the elevation, get a few mental cues. There's a couple of like steep climbs on the course. And it was kind of nice to just be like, okay, like when I see this, you know, around mile 25 and I take this left, that's like the immediate climb. And so it ended up, down here, like at the very tip, right at that left-hand turn, you pitch up, you know, probably 4, 5, 6%. And admittedly, like virtually, it felt a lot harder than in real life. So I'm standing there before the race swim and I'm like talking to other athletes and I'm like, yeah, mile 25 is this steep thing. And I'm probably scaring all these folks around me. And then I get out there and I'm like, oh, that took 40 seconds to get up and over. And then it was done, you know.
Right. I remember that whole section in Andrews there at the bottom, though. That was awful. Is that still bad?
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of the roads I think they've repaved a lot. I mean, there is a lot of really nice paved roads. There's also a lot of like the strip, like where they filled in like the chip seal stuff. So there were different sections. I mean, nothing that was like, oh, this is really affecting, like from a rolling resistance perspective. I never felt like I was really fighting. And it is a fast course. I think that the challenge that I had, you know, well, we can get into the bike course, you know, in more detail, but, you know, the challenge that I had is that I really like riding at 80 RPM, roughly 75 RPM. And so that being the case, I really avoided like spinning up to maintain. Well, I just had a lot of coasting time down hills. Right. So, it's definitely a course. If you're a strong cyclist, you probably could go with a bigger tooth front, you know, crank, to ride that a little bit more evenly. I mean, I think I had an average power for the ride of like 270, 275, something like that for normalized, but my average was like 250 and change.
Okay.
So it was a very, like, the variability index of that, it's almost like a 0.9, 0.10, like 1.1, something like that. And I think just, even though I'm not necessarily crushing myself climbing the hills and then I'm just coasting down, I think just the fact of like the undulation, of like the effort, and like, I think that played a role, right? Especially, at least for me, I think it fatigued me more quickly for someone that is riding indoors constantly and like really used to just staying in like this 10-watt range on, on a trainer. I just think the variability of my cadence and the power and everything, for whatever reason, I think it just had an impact, on my legs. Even though it's not like I was pushing power that was anything outsized from what I'm capable of. I just think the undulating nature of the course and how my body absorbed that was, it wasn't as, my body wasn't as prepared for that as it would have been for like some flat, super flat course like Panama City, for example.
So. Yeah, exactly. I think there's like you mentioned, I think there's an inability to get into a groove that for athletes like you and I who spend a lot of time indoors, like we are groove people. We're like, oh yeah, 25 minutes, like let's lock and load. And when it's like just enough changing and you're like, do I shift right now? I think I'm okay. Like maybe I don't shift. Like I'll just kind of the watts go up like that. It's just enough of like, I think it's different, but your muscles maybe not feeling the same way that your brain is. So yeah, I know what you mean. Okay. All right. Very cool. Well,
so go ahead.
No, I was going to say, why don't we, why don't you take like, why don't we kind of get into some of the tactics, like in terms of how the race played out, because I think you have some interesting perspectives, just, you're with your competitive nature and where you are in the race. Like you started super early, right? So cruise the swim, but then you're out there on the bike and you see, get those plates through.
So I've read and listened to several things about Ironman Chattanooga, and to give you a sense, like when racing Gulf Coast last year, I think there was like a total of 1,600 people, like participants total, and Chattanooga is 3,500. I mean, I saw a bib number of 3,500, and that's a lot of people to get in the water, and they're doing it at like 4 at a time. So one of the pieces of intel, that I kind of garnered from kind of doing some research is that in the past, it has taken more than 60 minutes to get everyone in the water.
That's unbelievable.
And I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like, so at pretty much every race, regardless of what I anticipate my swim time to be, because I don't have like anxiety around having somebody swim over me. Or bump into me or anything like that. If you do, I think you play this differently. I want to be in the water as quickly as possible. And primarily, I mean, in this case, yes, I didn't want to wait like an hour to get in the water. But at the same time, like I want to start the run as early in the day as possible, right? I mean, the difference between running at 10:30 or 11 in the morning and running at 12:30 in the afternoon could be significant. It could be 10 degrees, 15 degrees. And that's huge. And the other challenge here too, on these hot races is that the aid stations run out of stuff. They run out of ice. They run out of the stuff that you want. So let me see real quick. Hold on.
No problem. And that's actually just real fast. Like that's actually a great call out, because I think when people think about strategy, they kind of do a lot around like, what am I going to impose on this day? And they look at the course and the setup as a static entity. And like you're talking about, once you kind of race a few times, you kind of get a sense of like, I know exactly what's going to happen after 2 hours in, which is like the aid station volunteers are over eager. They're going to hand stuff out. All of a sudden they're running short. They got to call an ATV to come bring stuff. It's already somewhere else. Like it all starts to fall apart real quickly.
Yeah. So got in the water so I basically knowing that I got up probably like full Ironman early, like 3:30. walked from the hotel down to A Station, got it ready,
Mm-hmm.
and got bussed up to the swim start. And I ended up sitting there for probably an hour and a half, before I started the swim.
Wow.
I took some nutrition with me, some hydration with me, kind of anticipating that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's worth it, right? I mean, it was worth it to me, to knowing that, like, I'm a very strong cyclist, not to trying to be like toot my own horn on that, but the more people that come out of the water in front of me is like the more people I have to pass on the bike. I
Exactly.
mean, that's how races have historically played out.
Right.
So, got in the water as early as possible, maybe 10, 15 minutes into the race, got through that. Um, it was a very long transition. They had wetsuit strippers, which was nice.
Okay.
Um, and, went through all that, started the bike, and really just kind of got dialed in, started, drinking. I was trying to I drank, I think, maybe 2 bottles right out of the gate in the first, 50 minutes. Just wanted to get the hydration thing started. Um, and I will say, like, on this course, so historically how things play out is like I just ride through groups of people for like the first hour and a half, and
Mm-hmm.
eventually, like, the super swimmers that are also super bikers, like, are so far in
Mm-hmm.
front, I don't see them, and I end up in this like no man's land of like I'm just in between, and I don't see anybody for like
Right,
45
right.
minutes.
It's like
Um,
doing the local, like people don't appreciate that because you're like race day and you see the pictures, but like for reals, like there's parts of your race where you're like, am I in the right
am I on
place?
course right
Like
now? Yeah,
I'm not quite
yeah.
sure. The computer says I'm good, but I don't know.
It-
Yeah.
you know, and so, this race, I think, played out a little differently because of, I mean, Chattanooga it's a beautiful course. It's very well known. It's highly, like, I guess, marketed by Ironman. You
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of participants, a lot of high quality, you get a lot of high quality athletes. And so with that, being the
Mm-hmm.
case, you attract people, unfortunately, that maybe don't have the same, like, moral or ethical standards around racing, that maybe, some you know some people think it's okay, some people don't. And from my perspective, like, what I saw on the bike course, unfortunately, um, you know I when you're and I guess my view on this changes depending upon the kind of athlete you are. If you're a middle of the pack athlete, you're not vying for like a top 5 or a top 10 in your age group, and you're just kind of inundated with cyclists all around you. It's really hard to maintain like a draft zone, and it's really hard to not just kind of be in a group. And that is a different situation. Like, there's not a lot you can do about that situation, because that's just where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with what I saw, on the back hour of that bike course, was there are athletes that are very fit, riding very expensive bikes, that are clearly trying to go fast, and,
Mm-hmm.
they were just, I mean, on each other's tails. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they were working together. I would pass them, they passed me back 5 minutes later. Same
Right.
two guys trading time. So, just, it is what it is, on a big course like that. Lots of participants, but, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it it just was it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say too, like, it wasn't a closed course, so there were a couple of times where a vehicle kind of gets in front of you, and then you're kind of
No.
trying to figure out, like, do you pass the vehicle on the right, or do you not? Do you wait?
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, it was a great swim, great bike. Um, I did that undulating course. I did cramp in the hamstring, like, at mile like 52,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew, like, this wasn't like a hydration, kind of issue, because I was very on top of the nutrition and hydration. This was like the muscular fatigue kind of
Mm-hmm.
cramp, where
Oh
it
yeah.
was just like, to your point about like those hills, it was like I chose to not shift and push watts up over, right, or let my cadence lower and muscle up over, just a, a few too many, I think, unfortunately. And so I felt that. I got it stretched out on the bike, rolled into T2. You know, T2, I've gotten a lot better at T2 over the years. I now like had a gallon Ziploc bag of pretty much everything but my socks and shoes. And I'm carrying that thing out at T2, putting stuff on, you know, like I went with the Omius headband, which is a first. You don't really wear hats, but I ended up really liking the headband. You know, putting the bib on, you know, throwing nutrition in my pockets and stuff. So my T2 is quicker than T1, which is great. And knowing the, you know, the court from the course perspective, I went out easy. I mean, I say easy. I mean, it was probably like 7:30 pace up that first hill in that first mile, which for me, I felt like I was jogging. I mean, there was like no effort from me, like trying to climb this thing. I was really just taking it easy. I watched several of the past pro races for the 70.3, and I saw people that jetted out of I mean, they're pros, so you take it with a grain of salt. They jet out of T2 and they just don't have the legs at the end and they get gassed, they get passed, right? Versus the people that come out of T2 like steady, those are the people that are passing at mile 11. So I was like, okay, I mean, I'm not a pro by any means. I'm not running those paces, but it's like, if they're taking it easy out of T2 and having good performances, like I should do the same, you know? And honestly, as soon as you get up that first hill, it either flattens out or you're going downhill. And I pulled all that time back. Well, I mean, plus, and then some because of the descents. So as far as the run goes, again, the benefit of getting out there early, huge, because I probably ran when it was 78 or 80 degrees, and it was 86, you know, by the time I finished, 30 minutes after I finished. This is the first time that I've been very diligent about taking calories. So I took Morton gels. I probably took in 600 or 700 calories of the gels across an hour and 35-minute run, hour and 33-minute run. And it was like every 20, 30 minutes I was putting gels back, and then just water on my head. I had a Race Saver bag with ice every time I could get it. And that was, I mean, I was running easy. I mean, compared to the paces I was running in training for like those intervals and things, I never felt like I was out of breath. I mean, my heart rate got high, but I was really just cruising. I ended up having cramps in my quads, some of the worst cramps I've ever had for like the last 8 miles. It was just alternate from like one quad to the next, and it just kept going. And that really ended up being kind of the limiter. And I think that has less to do with the run and more to do with how I chose to bike the course. Right. So I chose to make I guess I made the decision to make fewer decisions around shifting, and that came back to bite me on the run course with just muscular fatigue cramps. Otherwise, the thing I kind of have been telling myself for weeks leading up to that is like, I was going to get to mile 10, 11, and then it was just time to dig. And it was like the word dig, I kept kind of saying it to myself. And then I got to that mile, like 10 and a half or 11, I started skipping aid stations. And then I was like shouting dig, like running across the pedestrian bridge, like go, like you're almost there. And then the fueling, the calories, I actually had the ability to kick for like the last 2 miles. And I think those were some of my fastest miles because I was just trying to get to the finish line. By the time I crossed the finish line, I had nothing left. I mean, it wasn't like I couldn't have, it's not like, oh, there's the finish line, let me sprint 100 yards. This is like, I was like 187 heart rate, you know, at the very tail end. I mean, my wife got a video of me running on the red carpet, and it is some of the ugliest running I've ever seen. It was just me like boom, boom, you know, no rhythm. But anyway, so it was probably my best run in triathlon that I've ever had. And so it's just all in all ended up being a 7-minute PR, 4:35 and change. And, it was a great day. From a training perspective, it turned out really well. I think, just where whether or not riding outside or getting outside more would have had an impact for a better result. Unfortunately, that's not where, my life is right now. So for me, getting the sessions in where I can, maybe there is a little extra benefit to be had by doing those things, but the way it fits into life with the kids and everything, I did what I could, and it turned out, couldn't be happier.
Yeah, you should. And it should be. I want to touch on two things here that stand out to me. First is that all of that steady running, like that work coming back from injury and now just being like, hey, I'm just going to run my TRP. I'm going to just lock in my pace. That's a huge investment. And you're only just seeing the benefits of that. It's going to pay dividends for the next 12 months. And there's such value in consistent running. And like the amount of hard running you need to be a better runner on race day is very minimal. But we often over-index. And so one of the things that I really liked about your build this year was that you weren't worried about pushing the run. You're like, hey, I'm going to work hard on the bike, but the run's just a run. And given where you are competitively, that's a great place to be. You're not in a position where you're like, hey, listen, I got to move my run forward 2 minutes. Otherwise I missed the cutoff, right? Like when people have that math, like looming, then they're like, I'm in trouble now. But in your case, with the run where it is, like, great. And I would say to you, like, I think you're not going to race again for a while. So like just being on the steady state is like such an advantage. Like as an investment long term, it's like compound interest. Like it just adds up. You're getting fit, you're getting strong. And if you need to go fast, it's like, oh, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to put in some quality sessions, and then you're pretty much done. Like it moves you up a level, and you're like, now I'm going to go back. I'm going to sit on this new level for a while. So you absorb. So that's one. And I think that's, again, like not indicative of your race. But the second piece I would say is getting faster on the bike in these conditions, like where everyone else is racing at that level. Your next step is, now that you know how you can put a good run together, obviously making sure we do our best to eliminate the cramps, is how do we start attacking parts of that course? Not that like you're going to go nuts, but like, where are the places on the course where we say, hey, you know what? If I put in if you put your steady on the course, like if we take your steady, do the whole clear plastic, overlay it over the top of the race and say, all right, we know Jonathan can hold 20 minutes at this number or 10 minutes at this number. That's your skill set. So it's like, let's take that number and we're going to put that in 2 or 3 places on this course specifically. Like otherwise you're sort of like, free ride, got to manage the course, be smart on my zones. But where are the biggest delta places on that course relative to your competition? Because I like to free you up a little bit to be a little more aggressive in key places, because I think you can handle it, and I think but if you're able to step it back down. Some people we hit the aggressive button and they never turn it off. I'm like, you were supposed to turn it off. Like, what just happened? Yeah. You blew yourself up. But finding those opportunities to explore what you have in the bike bank, if you will, I think that'll bring some gains for you as well. So
yeah, so coming into this race, I wanted to have a good run. Like I wanted to see that hard work in training for the run show up on race day. And last year I had my best run in a 70.3, and that was a 142. So I shaved 9 minutes off of it on a harder course, which is great. So, like, even though I ended up cramping, and I think that's because of how I rode the course, lesson learned, we need to make some adjustments there. In the back of my mind, this was like a 70.3 that I was like, I want to crack this nut kind of thing. Like, I've been performing well, like at the Ironman distance, which is a kind of a different ball game altogether, because you're pushing a different pace on the bike. The run's a lot different. And this was like, I want to go out and run a pace that is a fast 70.3 pace, on top of like a fast, 70.3 bike pace. And so in the back of my head, I also tried to be cognizant of like not pushing the bike too much, because I wanted to see the run, so maybe could have done more on the bike, without it affecting my run. But this was the race where it was like, I want to see if I can do it and try to be conservative on the bike so I can see the run. And now that I've seen the run, the next one I want to do, maybe push the needle a little bit more, take a more like a race approach versus like, this is me, and to be honest with you, like how you started off saying, external versus internal. This was one of those races where it was like my personal best, from a time perspective, I'm super happy with it. But against the field, I was just like jaw drop. Like that was 18th. Like, oh my gosh, like these guys are just phenomenal,
Right.
So it's, a little bit of, so I was surprised by that because I was like, man, the way I just ran, that's top 10. And it just wasn't. So,
No. It's like, it's one of those things, like it is for you. And I think we, like, part of it is we eliminate the down parts, right? So we just say, hey, like if we take, not unforced errors, but if we eliminate them problems, there's time inside those spaces, right? You're already getting faster through transitions. That's awesome. But a faster bike performance on that course, it could just be, we're head down in the aero bars in a couple key sections, and we're going to really kind of kick, because the 70.3, people tend to race that at the front end more like a bike race. Like they're kind of hammering those hills a bit, and they're counting on basically the way it plays out. If you have a group at the front end on rolling courses like that, what the other people are doing is they're hammering the hills. Whoever's around them when they get close to the top, they're close together, whether it's legal or not, TBD. And they can kind of get down the hill and onto the flats together. They don't separate very much on the flats. Like it's hard to pull away at your level, right? So you're not going to just ride off someone off your wheel, but it's the hills that separate. So it becomes more like a bike course. So it's like, how do I, when you see that group up the hill, up the road at a hill or whatever that is, it's like, how do you start making decisions like, oh, I want to be up there. I want to be, 250 more meters up the road. So I'm just off the back of that group. And just to be a little more tactical you executed a great race, but like at that level, you have to kind of play the game as close as you can, but still be within the bounds of the rules, So anyway.
Yeah. And that was hard too. Is I've always like it seemed like no one's riding your pace. So it's like, do I back off here and ride off, even legally? Do I ride off the back of this group, even if it feels easy, or do I push ahead of them? And what's the benefit of pushing ahead of them? And I think that's where I got caught. Like, let me push ahead, and then they'd come back around me, and then it just ended up being this weird, like, so I don't know. I mean, I could probably, after all of that, I probably came off the bike 30 seconds ahead of them or something. Just like something that was so not meaningful. Once you start the run, So, but it was a great start to the year. I got to figure out how I'm going to manage the next 21 weeks going into Kona and what I want that to look like. And honestly, this Chattanooga performance is. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, you and I can connect and we can kind of break it down. I think it should, like, I think for me, with my coach hat on, I think that what it shows me is like the strength that you have, and you've built this incredible durability. So I'm not like, it's more about like, how do we bring heat into the run? How do we, make you into a metronome on that run? What does body composition look like relative to Kona, where it's so important? And then again, to the bike is like, now we can start bringing this mindset into the bike, and I could dust off the plan that I had, which is like, how do I get to Javi? How do I get into that number? Like, how do we make the race? In other words, what I'm really saying is, not for the people listening at home who aren't tuned in, I'm not saying just race harder all the time. I'm saying, how do we race hard so that the rest of the race is much easier, right? Because when you look at the pros racing in Hawaii, for example, they're all out to Javi, but on their way back, they're not working that hard. At that point in time, you can't get away from anybody. You're just kind of stuck in your group. Maybe someone goes for the bike course record. Maybe someone who's not a great runner rolls the dice and says, I'm just going to try and get 10 minutes and make them try and catch me. But for the amateurs out there, it's like, if I can get to Javi and turn it around and be relatively on cruise control on the way back, my heart rate is so low. My TSS is so much lower on the way back relative to outbound.
Right.
You're like, it's practically cheating, and so it's you've earned the right to be in that level of decision making, whereas most of those moves on the chessboard are not available. So we can start talking about some of that stuff too. So
Yeah.
right.
No, it sounds good.
Awesome.
I'm eager to get started, get back at it, and have that to
Okay.
kind of work toward.
I love it.
But no,
Very cool.
overall, I would recommend Chattanooga to any
Mm.
athlete. I mean, just regardless of whether you're front pack, middle, back, doesn't matter. I mean, it's a great course, really awesome downtown. I
Mhm.
mean, you've been there, like super family friendly. My
Mhm.
wife and 3 kids were there spectating. They got to see me a few times. So, um,
Mhm.
in general, like I mean,
Mhm.
I mean, I just love the course, and turned out really well. Had a good day.
They do. It's just like to your point. It's just a great, as we wrap here. Like it's a great. Um, it's family friendly. It's accessible. It's a challenging course. Like you want it to be somewhat hard, but it's got enough variety between the swim style, right, with the river, and then the road and the
Yeah,
and the run. I think it's just it requires tactics. Like it's perfect. It's got like everything you need, just a little more condensed, which is fine. Because some 70.3s are just, where am I?
yeah,
Middle of nowhere, like it's just a ghost town, or the course is just super flat, which is like great. It's just a go as fast as you can all the time effort, which is just not exciting after a while. Once you get up to 100 miles an hour in your car, you're kind of like,
yeah.
now what happens, and it just gets boring. So
Just
no, thanks for the plug.
just eating a bar, drinking a drink. Yeah, no,
Exactly. You're like,
absolutely. Thanks,
more of
Patrick.
those. Oh, this is great, Jonathan. Thank you. And
So
so enjoy your weekend. Enjoy more dance recitals. Pack those in while you can. And let's touch base in the next week or so and get you dialed
okay.
in on some mid-season work we can get ready for. All right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Great.
Have a good
This
one.
is awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Yep.
All right. I'll see you, brother.